Facebook. I know that you were a software engineer for them. So, Mike, I'm not big into conspiracy theories, Ian, but I've been suppressed, censored, shut down,
Yeah.
shadow ban. I mean, when you go to Instagram and you type in my username, if you don't type it in
Yeah.
AP4LIBERTY, the whole thing, you can go all the way up to the AP4Libert. And if you don't type the Y, you're not going to find my account. And Facebook is apologizing, saying it was a mistake that they were taking down the Trump picture and stuff. You've got a little more insight into what goes on behind the scenes over there. You want to share with us some of that?
Yeah, I think first off, I want to say that censorship is going on. I'm not here, defending Facebook, saying that anti-conservative bias doesn't exist. Obviously, you being essentially shadow banned is real. I've been shadow banned too. It was last year. I shared a picture. I don't know if you remember the New York Times shared that. It was right after the Kanye West stuff. They shared a crossword that looked exactly like a swastika, and everyone on the left said, "No, it's no big deal. You're just being a snowflake." And I shared a picture of that crossword saying, "Hey, it kind of looks like a swastika." And Instagram shadow banned me for I think 6 months. I was demonetized on a bunch of different platforms. And so, either it's a swastika or it's not. There's a ton of conservative stuff going on. With the Trump image thing, I try to push back just a little bit because I think people need to really. It's hard because I understand people's reaction, but I also think people need to understand not only the weakness in technology, but the weakness in the policy. It's not like Facebook is just this evil corporation puppet mastering speech. There are people certainly in the middle, policy-wise, who are doing that. But to rewind a little bit, I worked as a software engineer on their Facebook fact-checking team, which basically meant I built the tools for a year or two that help people actually do the fact-checking. And the image that got fact-checked and therefore pushed down onto the news feed, it probably made it harder to distribute. Fewer people saw it. And you also had that warning coming up saying this was false, was the famous image that millions of people across the world have seen now, which is the Trump fist in the air straight after being shot image, probably the most iconic image of this century at this point, and certainly our generation. And that was marked as, I believe, false or misleading or any number of different labels by USA Today and AFP, which are both fact-checking groups in the United States. It turned out these fact checks were actually related to a different image. It was an image of that fist in the air, but either Trump was made to be smiling like a deep fake, or the Secret Service agents were meant to be made to be smiling, to either make it seem like it was some kind of conspiracy to have Donald Trump killed, which of course it still may be, but certainly not in the image, or that Donald Trump was smiling as if it was his idea. Some of the posts they actually originally marked as false were saying, "See, Trump wanted this to happen. What a photo op this was. Trump wanted to get shot," which is all left-wing anti-Trump propaganda. And so this started off as actually, like, I think a good fact check. Instance, like we see it on Twitter all the time, where like left-wing propaganda is being debunked in real time. The problem came where either image matching screwed up completely and they connected this with the real image, which of course I don't take as too realistic in this case, because image matching should be better than that. Or the fact checking organizations basically clicked through a ton of content and applied this fact check to content that was not relevant. Either way, this was obviously a mistake and they rectified it, but it's hugely damaging because, as you know, anything on social media, if it's initially suppressed, the early seconds or the early minutes of content are the key moments for that content. If it's suppressed, it's already buried. It's like everything in a line on social media. You get your one chance to show people your content. If you are 10 minutes late, hours late, days late, no one cares anymore. And so, yes, they uncensored it, but the damage is done. But I also think people understand that this is actually more of a problem with the amount of power that is being handed to fact-checking companies rather than just Facebook there with a button saying censor, 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 which I think actually makes it worse, because I think as a company, they've absolved themselves of responsibility by handing a ton of responsibility to organizations that are pretty obviously biased. And I think that is a harder problem to solve, unfortunately. That's why I kind of wanted to speak out.
Well, so that all makes perfect sense, and it makes sense that algorithms would make a mistake in judging two images that looked very similar. One which is a doctored fake photo, and another which is completely is completely legitimate. That the tin eye of the robots would see them as being very similar. It's kind of like how I was watching a video this morning in the Wall Street Journal about Tesla's automatic driving functions and how they can only run based on images or data that they have been trained on, right? It's not like us where we can immediately learn the new data and understand it in that context. But here's the problem, is that it seems as if the weighting might really be the question here, Ian, because if you think about it, it just seems to me as if conservatives or libertarians get fact-checked immediately, and then leftists get fact-checked after the election. For example, I brought up the whole very fine people on both sides lie that the left was saying about Donald Trump, saying this about Nazis, and then Snopes 4 years later fact checks it. Now the left is spreading this conspiracy theory about Donald Trump not actually being shot, despite the FBI, who hates Trump, saying, yes, indeed, he was shot. They're posting photographs of his ear, which are going viral right now as we speak, saying cartilage can't grow back, it's fake, blah, blah, blah. It just seems as if when I post something, Ian, it gets reported immediately. I mean, I don't. Here's the thing: I compare the left to Nazis all of the time because they march in the streets against Jews. And they're burning Israeli flags and they're saying things like "death to the Jews." And so when I do things like that, they are saying that I'm promoting Nazis. They say that I'm promoting white nationalism, and it happens fast. I mean, very fast. But when the left posts death to the Jews, it hangs out there for a very long time, Ian. Couldn't it be that the fact checking might be equal in the sense that they'll get to it one day and eventually it will be equality, but not until after the election? I mean, maybe that's the conspiracy, Ian.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I think there are two issues here. Is one is that these fact checkers, at least on Facebook, I don't know about other platforms, but Facebook, Instagram, Threads, they're at liberty to pick the content they fact check and the content they don't. And they're all either openly left wing or, subtly left wing. They're all former journalists, a place like CNN, who see it as their civic duty to fact check the evil right. And so that's why they're usually obsessively focused on conservative misinformation or so-called conservative misinformation, or people like you who are saying things they don't want people to hear that are true, just because they simply see themselves as purely focused on right-wing lies, because the left wing never lies, Austin. Everything the left say and do is good and pure, and everything the right does is evil in their eyes. But they also understand something that's actually really important here, which is we exist in 4-year chunks of time called elections. And they know that if you delay something long enough, the truth doesn't really matter. As long as you can delay people finding out the truth for long enough. Think about the Hunter Biden laptop story. Everyone is pretty much openly acknowledging now that was completely made up. All of the Russian disinformation stuff was a complete lie. It was all a fabrication to defend Joe Biden and his corrupt, sordid family. Doesn't matter. He's in office. He won the election. You can't go back in time. So they know that, yes, they can pretend like they care about the truth by somewhat fact-checking things years later, but it doesn't matter. Someone like you is a threat now. That's why they fact check you today, and they'll fact check the Bidens or the Clintons or any left wing organization in 2, 3, 4 years' time. Just so happens to be straight after the election when it doesn't matter anymore. I think that's the key thing, is that I think we need more right wing fact checkers out there. I think we're seeing great things on community notes, for example, on X and Twitter. But in terms of Facebook, it's only a set group of third-party fact-checking organizations that are given this power. And that's why you always see it going against people like us, is because they believe that we're the liars and their side isn't.
See, I think that it's possible. Here's another, maybe not a conspiracy so much, but this is just a theory, is that Mark Zuckerberg seems to be, I won't say becoming more right-wing these days, but I do think that, and maybe this is completely PR, it could all be completely fake. He's just trying to not look like he hates the United States, but I see him flying the American flag when he's out on his surfboard. I see him saying things like Donald Trump surviving his assassination attempt is badass. I see him doing things like growing cows, beef farms out in Hawaii, which is obviously not good for the climate, right? Doing the kinds of things, that are repellent to leftists. So maybe this is all just some attempted PR transformation on his part. But the reality is, Ian, and maybe you can speak to this, is that there's a proverbial bayonet to his throat in the sense that the culture of Silicon Valley and the people who work for Meta and the people who are surrounding him will never allow him to have people like yourself. I mean, you're not on the Facebook team anymore, Ian, right? You're not there anymore. I imagine that there are probably very few people at Meta who think the way that you or I think
Hmm.
that are on fact-checking teams. I mean, he's sort of got his, the left has their knife to his throat, because if we remember after 2016 when Trump got elected, the left all blamed Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook. All of the changes that came about on these social platforms were meant to fortify the election to prevent people like you or I from having to have a bigger voice. Now you're a young whippersnapper. You might not have been as active politically online back in like 2012 or 2013, but conservatives like Ben Shapiro and Dan Bongino and even guys like me used to dominate the
Hmm.
news, the trending news on Facebook. There used to be a trending news in the top right hand corner. They got rid of that pretty damn quick, because when people like ourselves are allowed to have free speech on these platforms again, we always dominate it because we can win an argument. So that when the left can't win an argument, they cheat.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack there. I think
Yes.
one, I want to make it pretty clear that I left Facebook. I wasn't fired or anything.
Okay. Yeah.
I was politically active while I was there. I was doing a podcast. I was writing articles. I was very active on social media, and Facebook were aware of employees who wanted to get me fired, which I think kind of flies in the face of what you see with a lot of other Silicon Valley companies. So I think that was pretty wonderful in a lot of ways. There's certainly a lot of people who are incredibly politically active in the other direction and see it as their responsibility to leverage Facebook's power to push what they see as left-wing perfect views. But I think the issue with a lot of these Silicon Valley companies is it's never the head of the snake, it's the body of the snake that's the problem. I think someone like Mark Zuckerberg, as you never see it publicly, but seeing him internally, we would have weekly Q&A sessions where he would come and just answer questions from employees, and he would have to face the most ridiculous radical left-wing vitriol, asking why conservatives are still allowed on the platform, why Trump hasn't been censored yet, because people internally were pushing to have Trump thrown off the platform for years, and he was one of the few voices actually pushing for free speech, pushing back against this nonsense. And I think it gets to a point where he might be wrong, but he was trying to find this balance of trying to make it work. And I think a lot of these software companies capitulated at the very last moment. You actually saw Trump on social media. It was almost overnight. They all decided to ban him in one foul swoop. But I think Mark Zuckerberg himself actually cares about free speech. He's obviously left wing. I think he and I probably wouldn't agree on a ton of political things, but he's pro America and he's pro free speech. It certainly doesn't seem that way if you actually look at the policies of Facebook in recent years. But then again, it's not all down to him. There's a lot of internal pressure. There's a lot of people you have to basically bring along to your side. And he's openly admitted that it's been a learning process. He's a young guy too, and he's made mistakes in the past. And I think we're seeing his transformation in a way of being more confident with these kind of issues. But I also think we're seeing a cultural transformation where people are realizing that you can push back against this woke bullshit. It is okay to disagree. And I think we're starting to see that more and more outside of just the political sphere, because it's all very well Trump making a name for himself, being the guy pushing back, right? That's one of Trump's big brands. That's why people were attracted to him in the first place, is because we were surrounded by politicians on the left and the right who were terrified of saying the wrong thing. And then you have Trump who comes along who doesn't care what he says, which is, I think, what more people need to be like in a way. And I think now we're starting to see that trickle into the business community. You see a lot of people moving away from DEI, for example. And so I think Mark Zuckerberg is an example of that. And so I think it's good to see. I think a part of it is obviously PR, but I also think it's based on a genuine position of caring about issues, having heard him speak about these things, having seen him defend free speech against pretty vicious internal pressure, people getting up in his face and screaming about these issues. That's difficult to do year after year after year when you're not a political figure. It's one thing for you and I to receive political pressure for our views when that's literally our job. But when your job is running a software company and people are screaming in your face, a lot of people would just fold immediately, because why bother with the hassle, right? You just want to make money, you want to build products, just give these children what they want and they might go away. Obviously, that always blows up in your face. But I think it's testament to the fact he does actually have these values. Has made mistakes before. I'm not going to defend everything Facebook have done. I think they've made colossal mistakes, and I blame them in large part for Joe Biden's win in 2020 with the suppression of the Hunter Biden story. I think that was a colossal failure in social media history. But I think in recent times, I think Facebook have done more than people would like to give them credit for.
One last question for you, Ian. Should Facebook or these social media companies even be in the business of fact checking us? I mean, shouldn't we really just be able to say what we want to say, even if it's incorrect, even if it's wrong?
Mhm.
And isn't it really just our job to fact check for ourselves, and not some shadowy group behind a curtain to tell us to be the arbiters of what's real and what isn't? Because it just reminds me so much of the old mainstream media days when there were like 5 television channels and 5 major national newspapers, and they were the arbiters of what is right and wrong. And then there's the explosion of social media. And for a while, it was beautiful anarchy, it was beautiful chaos. And yes, people lied all of the time and people spread bullshit, but you knew that people were lying and spreading BS, and you knew it was your responsibility. And stupid people who fell for stupid bullshit, well, they would suffer the consequences of that because everybody knew that they had no idea how to fact check. So my last question to you, Ian, should Facebook even be in the business of setting up checking internally if they can't even do it right?
Yeah, I think this has been my main criticism for a long time. Is I think the goal of fact checking objectively in the naive perfect world is a good one, right? People knowing more facts is good. If you know something is true, that's good. If you know something is false, that's good. But also very much matters who's deciding what is true and what is false, and what is done with that information. For example, I would care far less about Facebook fact checking, regardless of how biased it is, if it was just a label placed on content and the content was left alone. Like if I were to put up a post, for example, and it goes viral, but some left wing fact checker says, oh, Ian's actually being misleading, but people still see it, I don't really care. What I care about is these people who are biased have their thumb on the scale of what goes viral and what doesn't, what people see. That's the key thing. It becomes censorship. More information is always good, but this isn't about more information, it's about less information. Again, I keep coming back to community notes because community notes obviously has issues, but more information there is good because you can still read the post, it still gets distribution. I don't believe it's suppressed at all, but you can actually see more information about that post and becomes a marketplace of ideas, which is the whole point of social media. And so I think Facebook should go more in that direction of if they want to keep these fact checking organizations, fine. I don't think they should. I think a lot of them are openly biased. I've met many of them, and a lot of them simply boast about what they're doing. I don't think they should be going down that route. I think Facebook, if they want to do fact checking, should either be employing more right wing fact checkers to try and even things out. But more importantly than all, they just need to take the thumb off the distribution networks. It needs to be all about providing more information. And then if people want to have something labeled as false by a fact checking organization, the people who care about that will care about that. The people who don't. But the moment you're covering images with a gray banner, so you have to do one more button click to see certain information, or the second something is buried in your news feed, so you have to go looking for it, or the second profiles like yours, for example, you cannot find in search unless you go to their profile. That is becoming censorship. That's becoming suppression of speech. And I think that's a direction social media shouldn't be going down because that's not their role,
Hmm.
right? That is not their role. And it's certainly anti free speech, certainly anti American. I think it'd be a very easy way to actually fix this problem. I don't think they'll do that because I think a lot of these organizations see this as almost their last hurrah. It's like their last grip on power. They're mad they're losing their grip on power, right? All these gatekeepers are mad. There's a reason media was all like classic legacy media was all over social media because social media was threatening them. This is all about power too. I think people often miss that layer to this really ugly cake is that yes, it's about speech, yes, it's about political bias, but there are also industries here that are on death's door and they do not want to be, and they are holding on to power for dear life. And so we've
Hmm.
also got to understand that there are people who are fighting not for the right thing, but simply for their paycheck. And as long as that's going on, people are going to make decisions that are best for their pocketbook, not necessarily best for the country.
I really can't say enough good things about your commentary. I do think that you are
Thank
one
you.
of the most important voices of your generation. And I read what you put out all the time. I follow you over on X at IG Haworth, like how on earth, HAWORTH. You can find Ian over on X.com where he's not suppressed and you can actually hear what he has to say. Ian, is there anything else that you'd like to plug or say before we let you go?
No, thank you as always for having me. Apologies for being late, and congratulations on the beautiful baby. It's wonderful to see these shreds of real life come through. I think all of us on X and social media are always so obsessed with all these silly little battles, and then you have images like your life coming through of real life and what really matters. So congratulations. I'm so happy for you.
Thanks, Ian. We appreciate you very much. Sorry about the time mess up. We'll have you on again really soon. Have a good one.